Hey, good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here.
Hey, how you doing?
I am. Hey, Darren. Good.
I don't think we have to record this meeting. I think that just comes on automatically. Let me figure that one out.
Hey, thanks for inviting me, Brian. I'm just here as an observer, and I'll have to bail out soon. I got another meeting, but certainly appreciate being being here. Good
Yeah,
luck to
no
you guys with
problem.
all this stuff. So,
Well, you're welcome to be an official member if you want, Rob, but
okay, thanks.
up to you. Request. All right. I don't know who's recording, but it's not me. And I guess I'm not the host. So anyway, cool. Um, Hello, Mr. Mayor. Hello, Alan. Stephen, what's going on?
Hey, and I think I joined first, so it looks like I have the host controls, so I
That's
can
cool.
stop recording
It's all good,
if I can
man.
figure that out.
You're the boss. You can have it. Don't
That
worry
is
about it.
more power than I need for
I
sure.
just I just switched computers. My other laptop like just died, so I'm trying to get this new machine up and running, and nothing works as it should. But hey,
Yeah.
such is life, right? All right.
Yeah.
People are joining. Duncan, I love the beard. It's a great look.
Okay. Yeah. Well, yeah, it works for COVID. I got used to it. I haven't dropped it since then. Yeah.
Mayor Sam, welcome. Thanks for joining.
Good morning.
Congrats on your election, or condolences, as the case may be.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
Uh,
We
yeah.
got a lot of work to do.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time. So everyone is here. Do you mind calling the meeting to order?
Sure. Yeah. We will call the meeting to order.
Hey, there you go. Very good. And if you don't mind, I'll do a quick roll call vote. So Boston. I don't see Matt here yet. Brockton.
Yeah.
Thanks, Alan. Chelsea.
Here.
Thanks, John. Fitchburg.
Here.
Thank you. Gloucester.
Here.
Lynn.
Here.
And Needham.
Here.
And Watertown.
Here.
So we have a quorum, so we can continue. So I thought we would start, if the co-chairs agree, with brief introductions, if that works, so we can all say hello to each other. And I'll just sort of go kind of how my screen is. So Maya Verga, do you want to go first?
Sure. Greg Verga, Mayor of Gloucester.
Thanks for being here. Duncan.
Duncan Allen, Needham's advisory board member, also a practicing transit and transportation engineer with some background in fare studies.
Just a little, Duncan. You're being very humble.
Okay. Yeah.
Duncan's worked on this stuff in many cities around the world for about 30 years. So I'm grateful to have him. Alan.
Alan Castelline, representative, designee from City of Brockton, and just, I guess, I've worked on fair stuff. For the MBTA member among us that I haven't met. I retired from the MBTA in 2006 and spent many years working on the fair committee.
Yes, you
And
did.
I've been on the advisory board now for a dozen years and have dealt with a lot of fair proposals.
Thanks, Alan. Aaron.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Aaron Clausen, the principal planner for the city of Lynn. Lead much of the transportation planning work here, although I have to be honest with you all, very limited experience with fare studies. So looking to learn a lot from you all. Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. Sorry, who's next on my list here? Mayor Sam, can you tell us how to pronounce your last name properly?
Squalia, like a storm squall. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, ma'am.
So yeah, Sam Squalia, mayor of Fitchburg. We are zone 8, the end of the line. We have 2 stops at the end of the line, Fitchburg and Wachusett, both in Fitchburg. And, you know, as one of the lowest median income communities in the Worcester County, you know, having, you know, this low income fare discussion is particularly important to Fitchburg residents. So thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Rob, you want to say hello?
Sure, yeah, Rob Sher, I'm the advisory board member from Ashland on the select board there and chair of the commuter rail committee for the MBTA advisory board. So I was interested in fare reduction and you know, happy to sit in. I apologize, I have to leave for another meeting shortly, but I'd like to participate or observe as much as I can of these. So I think it's a key issue. So thank you.
Thanks for being here. Steve.
Steve Magoon, I'm the Assistant City Manager for Community Development and Planning here in Watertown.
Thank you, Steve. And John DePriest, finally.
John DePriest. Hey, Steve, congratulations on your promotion. John DePriest, I'm the Director of Permitting and Land Use Planning for the City of Chelsea. I just started my 31st year here. And I've been the city's rep to the MBTA Advisory Board for all the past 30 years and served as a transportation planner for the first 15.
Excellent, Aaron. Thank you. Stephen, I'll let you guys introduce yourselves in a minute. Let me just talk briefly, if the co-chairs allow, just a little bit about the committee and kind of what we're trying to do here. So first of all, I'm Brian Kane. I'm the Executive Director of the MBTA Advisory Board. Like Alan, I used to work at the authority. I have led fare increase proposals before, back when we had to do them in person and get stuff thrown at us. But this one I think will be a little easier. At least I hope so. Oh, Matt Moran. Matt, welcome. You want to say hi?
Sure. Thanks, Brian. Didn't want to interrupt, but good to see everyone. Matt Moran with the City of Boston Transportation Department and also on the Rapid Transit Committee for the MBTA Advisory Board. Good morning.
Thanks for being here, Matt. So under Mass General Law, Chapter 161A, Section 5D, the MBTA Advisory Board is required to review major fare changes that the authority presents. So working with the officers of the advisory board, they felt that an ad hoc fare review committee was the best vehicle to accomplish that. And so this committee has been established. I'm very grateful to Mayors Verga and Squalia for agreeing to co-chair it, and very grateful for all of you for being here. The way that I see this working is we will get the presentation from the T today. I've scheduled 3 additional meetings, although I don't think we'll need them, but we have them. I will kind of take a crack at drafting a report based on your direction and your recommendations, which we'll discuss in open meeting. And eventually, hopefully, we'll get something approved, including a recommendation, and then that will go to the full advisory board at its meeting on March 12th. And then that will get it to the T in time for its meeting on the 28th of March, when its board of directors will take their final vote on the fare package. So that's the proposed calendar. Note, we're not going to meet, we'll meet on Fridays at this time, but not the week of public school vacation, because some of us have kids and have to go look at colleges and stuff. So with that, unless anybody wants to say anything else, let me welcome Stephen Povich, who has the distinct honor of being the Senior Director of Fare Policy and Analytics at the Authority, and you're here with your colleague David. And if the co-chairs agree, we can turn it over to the T.
Let's do it.
Excellent.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Brian. And thank you all for having us and for gathering. As Brian mentioned, I'm here with David Torella, who's the Senior Manager of Fare Policy, working with me on all things fare policy at the T. And so I know this group could have questions in a lot of different directions. So we welcome them. David has spent a lot of the time on the modeling work around ridership and revenue, among many other things. So wanted to make sure he was here as well. The two of us will split the presentation. I will share my screen. Oh, I'm not the host, and the host has disabled participant screen sharing.
I knew I'd get you. All right, hold on a second. All right, well, I'm not the host either. Does anybody know who the host of this meeting is?
I have a share screen option on mine. Does that make me the host?
I don't
No,
think
I
so.
have that and just tried it.
So if you click on there's three
okay.
bubbles on your picture at the top or wherever your pictures are. If you should have an option that says share screen or make host, or it should say you're the host. All right, if this doesn't work, I can log out and log back in quickly.
Even it looks like there's an option for claim hosts, for me at least.
All
in
right, so we'll just go
participants.
ahead and do that.
Where do you see that, David?
If you go participants, I see claim host.
Ah, nice.
Cool.
There's a 6 or 10 digit number that I need. A host key.
Come on, really? All right.
Mine looks
Let me
like
see if
I
it's in
have
the
the stop
calendar.
video option. Am I somehow a host? I didn't set this meeting up.
I think it might be 035575. Try that.
Yeah, sorry, as I was saying, I just switched computers and all this stuff was set up automatically before. So apologies for the delay.
No worries. That code was not, unfortunately, was not
Okay.
it.
All right. All right, hold on a second.
Well, usually the host is the one who actually set up the meeting.
Yeah, that's me. So let me try signing in on this machine here.
Yeah, if generally if you're not logged in, it won't recognize you as the host.
That's probably what we have happening here. So it's one of those things where you get a new machine, you had everything set up the way you wanted it. And then you switch and you got to remember all these passwords, like hundreds and hundreds of passwords.
Oh, Brian Kane is the host now.
Look at me go. All right. So sorry about that, Stephen. You'll be the co-host in a second, along with David. And yes, okay, you should have it now, Stephen.
Yes, perfect. Okay, now to share the right screen, one thing at a time here. Okay, hopefully everyone can see a PowerPoint slide in
Yes.
slideshow mode. Fantastic. Great. So as you all know, we have a proposed fare change package on the table for consideration by the board, the public, and our many stakeholders like the advisory board. This deck, just so everyone knows, is the one we've been using for our public meetings. It's very similar to what we showed the board, but it has sort of that flavor. And so if you have questions of things that are of a slightly different flavor, we're very happy to talk about them. Just so you know, that was the initial audience for this deck that we're taking through on sort of our roadshow. So as you know, the MBTA proposes fare changes as a package, putting a number of things together generally for board and public consideration. In this case, there's basically two pieces. The headline is the implementation of a new reduced fare program for income eligible riders. This has been called a lot of different things over the last decade or more: means tested fares, low income fares, income eligible fares. It's all the same thing. We're proposing to apply a reduced fare menu of prices, basically half price, to riders under 200% of the federal poverty level. Alongside this change, we have a couple smaller changes that are part of the package, which we'll speak to at the end. The first is the elimination of change tickets on fare boxes and the replacement with Charlie cards. And the second is the expansion of our weekend pass on commuter rail to include federal holidays. So again, those are smaller changes, but an important piece of the package that we'll come back to. In terms of the high-level process, to meet our federal requirements, our requirements under state law, and our board processes, we basically have a 3-month dialogue with the board, public, and other stakeholders. We introduced this package of fare changes to the board in January and released a key RFP for support for the program, which I'll come back to later. February is really the heart of our public comment period and the finalizing of our equity analysis. As you know, under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, we have to conduct an equity analysis on fare changes, and that equity analysis in draft form is complete because, of course, this is just a proposal at this stage. So the draft is complete and is on mbta.com for folks to review. But we'll talk a little bit about the results of that equity analysis later. And again, taking public comment this whole month. Public comment wraps at the end of the month, and we'll return to the board for approval in their March cycle. Appreciate the timeline Brian laid out and how nicely it fits into our plans here. I think likely we'll end up in front of the A&F subcommittee of the MBTA board which should be March 14th, and then the full board for a vote, which is the 28th, which again sounds like it fits nicely with your plan. So that's great. And then in terms of implementation, the smaller changes we can talk about as those will be implemented sooner, but income eligible reduced fares we'd expect to launch basically this summer, pending some of the key programmatic inputs. In terms of the context on reduced fares, the MBTA at a local context has a number of reduced and free fare programs. Riders who are blind and children 11 and under ride free, middle and high school students, low-income 18 to 25-year-olds, riders with disabilities, and seniors 65 plus all ride for reduced fares. But today there is no reduced fare program for low-income adults between ages 26 and 64. Our Youth Pass program for 18 to 25-year-olds is our only income eligible or means tested program today. When we look around the country and the world, 6 of the top 10 agencies in the US have means tested programs and 19 of the top 50. And importantly, most of them are doing what we're proposing for some key reasons. Most give a 50% discount, and most have a 200% of the federal poverty level income threshold. I think that's important, as we'll talk more to later in the presentation, because that cutoff is used for many other state and federal aid programs. And so instead of having folks directly demonstrate their eligibility based on their income, they'll be demonstrating their eligibility via enrollment in other programs with 200% FPL cutoffs or lower. So what are we proposing? We're proposing to expand reduced fares to riders with low income under that 200% threshold. Riders who are enrolled in SNAP or Mass Health programs will be eligible for these reduced fares. And importantly, for the first time to my knowledge in MBTA history, we'll be extending this reduced fare eligibility to our paratransit service, The Ride, for the first time for any reduced fare program. And as part of that expansion, we'll also be applying senior discounts to paratransit in both cases for our ADA or standard trips. So digging in a little bit more into the eligibility threshold, what is 200% of the federal poverty level? 200% of the federal poverty level is around $30,000 for an individual and $60,000 for a household of 4. It continues to scale up on household size, so it's about $100,000 for a household of 8. And again, in terms of demonstration of this eligibility, riders will demonstrate their income via enrollment in other programs. We have a really exciting integration with our partners at HHS, both DTA, the Department of Transitional Assistance, and Mass Health, to actually use their database and automatically and instantaneously verify that folks are enrolled in these programs with just a little bit of information from those people. Enrollment will last for a year and riders will reapply. We know there's a lot of complexity with these kinds of programs when folks are enrolled and fall out, et cetera. We're just going to keep it at a year where folks will apply. If they're accepted, their card will be active for a year. If they reapply before the end of the year, the card will remain active. If not, the card will be turned off, because they either didn't reapply or fell out of the income category. At launch, as I mentioned, we have partner programs that are listed here. The big ones are SNAP and Mass Health. I note that the 4 Mass Health programs that we're including, which are basically being included because of what their FPL cutoffs are, cover 90% of Mass Health enrollees. So those are the programs we'll use at launch. So what will the rider experience be? Riders who are enrolled in the program will be mailed a Charlie card that's valid for half fares. If you load it with stored value, you can tap it at a fare box or a fare gate and have half of the normal stored value or the full fare stored value deducted. If you use a fare vending machine or other sales channel, you have a menu of prices that is unlocked for half fares or half price passes, including, of course, on the commuter rail. Same thing on the M-Ticket app, for example. At the bottom, you can see how substantial this is and how exciting it is, in particular for frequent riders on bus and subway and for commuter rail riders. We all know, and based on all of your biographies, we know that you all live in many cases in some of our higher zones, which are relatively expensive. And so this is a meaningful discount that can save riders a really substantial amount of money, especially on commuter rail, but on all of our modes. This is sort of a fun slide we've been showing in public meetings. This is the locations of all of our public meetings and how you'd get to 10 Park Plaza, the MBTA headquarters, from there with full and reduced fares. So we don't need to spend too much time here, but you can see, I know we have folks from Brockton here, for example, and Lowell, which is even closer than Fitchburg. But these are some of the discounts that we'll be moving forward with under this proposal. I'd like to take a moment to talk about paratransit, and we're happy to talk more about some of the numbers related to paratransit, for lack of a better word, because paratransit is a really important element of this program, but a relatively complicated and frankly expensive element of the program. The expansion of reduced fares to include income eligible riders on the ride is the first MBTA reduced fare program to cover paratransit. And our proposal is to cover the ADA or standard trips, which are today $335, and under this program would be $1.70. There are two other price points for the ride. Premium trips are $560, and flex fares are $3 plus any cost over $40-$30. Paratransit is quite different, and David will speak to this in a couple of slides, but a bit different in terms of how variable the cost structure is and how we are federally mandated to meet every trip. So if a bus comes by and it's full, certainly we want to make sure we give everyone a ride, but we are not federally mandated to have an unfull bus for the next person left at the stop. That is not true for the ride. On the ride, if someone schedules a ride, we have to fulfill that ride. And again, the ride is smaller vehicles that are one-to-one or shared on a small basis. And so as you could imagine, the cost structure is a lot more variable. When we cut the fares in half for our standard trips, we expect to have more people want to take them, which is really good, but certainly an incremental cost that, again, David will speak to. I'm sorry that I missed a comment in the chat. Did you consider fuel assistance? Great question. Short answer, yes. Longer answer is we are starting the program by partnering, by using eligibility criteria that we can automatically verify. So there's this HHS database that we've signed data sharing agreements with, and we can ping that database instantaneously and see, is David Chirella enrolled in this Mouse Health program or SNAP or whatever. So we're going to start there because we know it has pretty good coverage, and it's will be really fast and easy for our riders and to administer. What we'll do after launch is spend time thinking about what are we missing, who are we missing, what can we layer in.
I would just, thanks, Stephen. I would just suggest, it's the OLHC, formerly DHCD, oversees that fuel assistance, so they're different from HHS. So they do have a ton of data and a lot of people involved in eligibility. So just a thought. So
no, it's a great thought, and that's, we want to talk to those folks. And just so everyone knows, because I didn't touch on it explicitly, many of your municipalities are Youth Pass partners, which is the municipal partnership that allows us to administer a program for low-income 18 to 25-year-olds. Our vision is, as soon as practicable, we'll fold that into this program. When we look at how people get into that program, it's basically SNAP, Mass Health, and Mass Grant. Mass Grant is a little bit different because it's based on FAFSA forms rather than FPL cutoffs. And so I would say fuel assistance and Mass Grant are some of the things that are at the top of our list to make sure we include as soon as we can to cover those folks. I'll move on to the application process. Thanks for coming, Rob. And again, as Rob did, please don't hesitate to put questions in the chat. We'll certainly have time at the end as well. In terms of the application process, this builds on a lot of work that T has been doing over the last few years related to reduced fare online applications in general, where we've been trying to streamline those and make them as easy for riders as possible. We expect this to be 4 steps and 5 minutes to complete because we have just a couple things we need from riders. The first is identity. Folks need to prove that they are who they say they are. And we'll do that first through an automatic and, again, instantaneous check with RMV data. So riders can tell us a little bit about themselves, as you can see on the right-hand side here. And we can ping the RMV and see if this person does, in fact, have a driver's license or some other form of identification. We know that not everyone has RMV IDs, and so we'll also be accepting things like passports and other forms of identification that we'll be able to verify in the back office by looking at images of uploaded documents. But the first identity check that we hope works for as many folks as possible, as easily as possible, is that RMV check. The second is eligibility, pinging the database that I mentioned. Is this person enrolled in one of these programs? Again, automatic and instantaneous. And then instant approval if someone is eligible. And finally, how do you want to get your card, mailed or picked up at a location Steve, I see your question. The application will be available in a number of languages: English, Spanish, Portuguese, Haitian Creole, Simplified Chinese, and Vietnamese. We appreciate there's often calls to expand that further, and that's certainly on our list of things to do as well. We've heard about some of the top languages in communities other than the ones on this list, and so that's again something that feels like a great next step. So if you have ones that feel important to your community, don't hesitate to let us know. The application will also be accessible to screen readers.
Steve, not to interrupt, Steve, but I feel like the question was on eligibility previously. Is there a mechanism for eligibility that if they don't have SNAP, Mass Health, et cetera, is there another alternate eligibility criteria?
Yeah, good question, and thanks. So the short answer is at launch, we will not take eligibility that in other forms other than those programs. And I don't expect that the MBTA would ever get into the game of reviewing pay stubs or tax documents in the way that some of our partner agencies do. I think what we'll be looking to do is expanding the list of eligible programs to the extent we can do it in a way that is reasonable for riders who are applying and reasonable for us to sort of make sense of and accept. So the short answer is, at launch, we're going to stick with these programs, but we're going to look to make the list as long as possible to get as many folks enrolled as possible. We have a work stream ongoing where we're studying basically who does this list leave out, who's not in these programs today in the Commonwealth, to understand how we can basically plug those holes. One of the key elements of the program will be support from a community partner. I mentioned an RFP earlier in the presentation. We released an RFP in January for community partner support to basically do three things. The first is, we know an online application doesn't work for everyone, and some people either want or need in-person support because they're not great on technology, or because it's not accessible to them, or they just prefer to apply in person and have a human they can ask questions to. So the first thing we'll be looking for a community partner to provide is doors around the MBTA service area for folks to walk in and apply. The second, and this could be the same partner or a different one, is back office verification. So I've highlighted the automatic verification that we'll be doing. We know that some folks will upload pictures of documents, and that's fine. We're looking to have support on that element of the program for folks to review those documents and confirm that they are, within the bounds of our program. And then finally, we'll be doing lots of outreach, which I'll touch on the next slide, but always looking for a partner to leverage their own networks in their communities around the network to build on that and get as many folks enrolled as possible. And then finally, before I pass it over to David to look at some of the numbers, how we're going to get the word out. So right now, we're doing a roadshow for the fare change proposal, which is, of course, relevant and important, but different from getting people enrolled in the program. We want to get as many people enrolled in the program as possible who are eligible in our age ranges and in the accepted programs. We basically have two categories of outreach planned. We have MBTA specific assets. We have physical assets all around the network, whether those are stations or stops or commuter rail vehicles or buses or subway cars, which we'll be putting material on, as well as our website and our social media channels. And then we'll also be collaborating with external parties. We want to work with our partners, in particular HHS, so that folks, who apply to SNAP can find out about this program, for example, and similar with Mass Health and others. We also have, our Youth Pass partners, again, that I mentioned, and other partners in the accessibility community, et cetera. And then we'll be creating a partner toolkit so we can send it to any partners who want it to have material to blast out to their networks. So that's how we're going to tell people about the program when it's launched. I'll pass it to David now, who can talk a little bit about some of our expectations for enrollment.
Thank you, Stephen. At full enrollment after this program is launched, we expect up to 62,000 people to benefit from the expanded eligibility for reduced fares. And of these 62,000 additional riders, we expect kind of long-term, steady state them to generate up to 8.1 million annual trips on subway, bus, commuter rail, and ferry. However, we expect this kind of ramp-up curve before we reach the steady state enrollment to take up to 5 years. As you launch any program, there is some time for word to get out, for people to become aware of it, for people to kind of go through the effort of enrolling themselves. And so in year one, while we expect 62,000 additional riders at steady state, in year one, we would expect more like 25 to 30,000 riders. In this chart on the screen, you can see our kind of upper and lower bounds of our confidence of enrolled riders marked by the orange bars on the right axis. And then our estimate of the additional trips that they would be induced in the blue kind of paint line from left to right and on the left axis. So in year one, we would expect about 25 to 30,000 additional riders, inducing about 1.5 million to 2 million additional trips. This will ramp up from year to year as more people sign up until FY29, when again, we expect up to about 62,000 riders, and from about 6.5 million to up to 8.1 million trips. Once we are 5 years into this program, we don't expect we would continue to see additional enrollment beyond that point. 5 years in, we think that's where everybody who will sign up will have signed up. So from that point forward, we would just expect, some baseline population growth and inflation that goes along with that, but no kind of expansion of that cohort of people who are signed up. The numbers I've mentioned so far refer to our fixed route system. So that's subway, bus, commuter rail, and ferry. In addition to that, on the ride, we would expect about 28,000 ride users to sign up, generating about 185,000 additional trips. And we would expect this ride enrollment to happen much faster than our fixed route enrollment. The ride is already a service where people are registered and have a kind of one-to-one relationship with the MBTA. With respect to ride users' ages, we already have that in our system through the ride registration process. So the speed at which ride users are able to be validated either by their age or by their income status, we expect to happen much faster than for fixed route riders who are kind of more anonymous to us and have less of a one-to-one high-touch relationship. Next slide, please, Stephen. As for the costs of this program, there are really three main buckets of costs that we see. The first one is fare revenue loss. This is just the lower fares that are coming into the T as revenue as a result of these thousands of riders getting half fares. In year one, we would expect this fare revenue loss to be between about $7 and $9 million, depending exactly on what enrollment looks like and what ridership patterns look like. But we're pretty confident in 7 to 9 million as kind of the lower to upper bounds of what fare revenue loss will be in year one. And the vast majority of that fare revenue loss comes on the fixed route network. That is subway, bus, ferry, and commuter rail. Prices on those modes are higher than they are in the ride, and use of those modes is much greater than is in the ride. And so that's why we see the majority of this fare revenue loss coming on the fixed route system. The second bucket of costs we see are operational costs. This is the cost of providing service to meet the induced demands that we expect this program to bring about. In year one, we expect this to be between $13 and $14 million. It's noteworthy here that the breakout by mode is kind of the opposite as it was for fare revenue loss. For operational costs, we expect the vast majority to come on the ride, not on the fixed route network. And this is because ride service, as Stephen mentioned previously, is very much a one-to-one. We send out an individual vehicle to pick somebody up and take them where they need to go service, much more so than buses or subways. It's easier to just kind of put more people on the existing vehicles being run. Each ride trip leads to significant operational costs for the MBTA. So as thousands of trips are induced, that is what leads to the kind of $13 million a year of additional ride operational costs we expect in year one to meet the induced demands. The third category is just kind of ongoing administration costs. This is the cost of maintaining the website by which people sign up. This is the cost of paying those community partners who are kind of providing the boots on the ground support and in-person application support to our riders. We expect that ongoing administration costs to be about $3 million a year, pretty consistently over the time period. So in year one, when you add up that 7 to 9 million in fare revenue loss, 13 to 14 million in operational costs, 3 million in administrative costs, that adds up to about $23 to $26 million in year one. As I mentioned previously, we expect enrollment to ramp up over time. And similarly, we expect costs to ramp up over time proportionally. So that 23 to 26 million in year one, we expect to ramp up to about 50 to 60 million in year 5. By that point, we will be at kind of steady state enrollment, and in that $50 to $60 million in year 5 would continue into future just with inflationary growth, but not with any volume growth, we think, beyond that point.
David, can I ask a question?
Sure.
So the governor's put 45 million in her budget in year
Right.
1, and there's no guarantee the governor's budget will pass in its current form.
Mm-hmm.
What happens if the governor's budget doesn't pass in its current form? And then what happens in the out years when that 45 million goes away, especially considering the fiscal cliff?
Right. Stephen, I think you might be better positioned
Yeah,
to comment
sure.
on that.
In case you didn't know, we're worried about the fiscal cliff around here.
No, that's good. So are we. No, look, I think there's a couple things. I think if the specific funding that the governor has outlined for this program and also the increase in funding for the MBTA in general doesn't come to pass in the way that it's been outlined, I think there's a bigger conversation at the MBTA, because I think that we'll have more on the table to talk about in the case of in that bad case, right? Where our view is that this is an important initiative that should be put up there and put out there with other important initiatives at the MBTA. This one doesn't exist yet, and other ones do, but we think that this is worth sort of the consideration of the board and our various partners like the advisory board and the legislature for being included in that mix when we look at how the T is spending money and how the T is funded. And so I think it has to be part of that bigger conversation. As we look at the out years, I think that most of that feels like it is a question for the new transportation task force, or whatever the title is that the governor has put in place with the secretary and others. Excuse me?
Gee, thanks.
Yeah. Because I agree with you that the question is, if the governor's proposed budget does come to pass, I think the T is in a safe place for the next year. And the question on this program and all other things is the out years. And so it feels like that's a question for that task force, appreciating that it's perhaps scary. Duncan?
Yeah, I just had a couple of questions. You mentioned you expressed the ridership increase in terms of number of trips. Do you happen to have that as a percent of boardings as well?
Yes, we do. I can pull up the numbers from my analysis I have here, but I believe it is something like 2 to 3% across the network.
I'm sorry, what percent was that? About 2
to 3%. Yeah, about 2.8% of bus and rapid, and about 2.7% of overall network.
Quick follow-up then. I mean, I've seen larger numbers from other systems. I assume that a fair number of eligible people are already eligible for things like the seniors and other established discounts.
Right. The way we established this population estimate is we looked at low-income individuals between the ages of 26 and 64 who are not disabled. So anybody who is disabled already has access to TAP. Anybody who is 26 or 25 or under has access to either Youth Pass, student, or child fares. Anybody who's 65 or above has access to senior fares. So the only kind of additional population we would take on is 26 to 64, low income, and without a disability.
Okay, thanks.
And just one thing I would add to that is we think that the folks who are enrolled will ride 25 to 30% more, but then of course, as David said, it's a small-ish group of the total. So on an overall basis, it's that 2 to 3%.
Okay, that's all helpful. Thank you.
Steve?
Kind of along the same lines. So the induced rides are the additional trips that 2 or 3% would take?
It's the induced rides that the 62,000 people who enroll will take. I don't know that is exactly 2 to 3% of our population overall, but the riders who are now getting a reduced fare, who never used to get a reduced fare, will start taking more rides. And that is what will lead to those up to 8.1 million trips in the out years.
Okay. And just one addition. In 2019, the MBTA did collaborated with researchers at MIT on a study on this topic, and basically did a randomized controlled trial where they gave some SNAP participants Charlie cards that allowed them to use reduced fares. And that's where some of these numbers come from. So those folks, whether they're taking 10 trips a week, they started taking 12 or 13 trips a week. If they're taking 20 trips a week, they were taking 24, 25 trips a week, et cetera. So that's where those,
and that's what the numbers of induced rides are, is that increase.
exactly.
Okay, thank you.
The kind of interesting way that it works out in our system is for passes, there's actually a greater than 50% discount if you're a reduced rider, as opposed to paying per trip. And so one of the impacts that we expect to see is actually greater pass enrollment among low-income individuals who will get an even better deal by signing up for monthly pass instead of paying per trip.
Hey, Stephen, I just want to note that it was the advisory board that paid for that MIT study in 2019.
Well, it's paying dividends now, so we appreciate it.
One quick follow-up, if I might, just on the administrative, you have total program costs. Do you have a number for the ongoing sort of administration of the deal as opposed to the revenue loss and the operating cost?
Yeah, that's the bottom line here in this table, the initial program design and ongoing administrative costs, which is about $3 million a year consistently.
Okay, I just want to make sure that you mentioned that, and I want to know that. I just wanted to be sure that was basically the, enrollment, eligibility checks, all that stuff, as opposed to any additional service or any fare loss. Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks. Alan?
Can you put back the chart that shows all the low income programs, for various age groups?
This one?
Yes. All right.
Sure.
So my question is, the youth 18 to 25 income is limited to young adults through municipal partnership. So what is that?
So the way that the Youth Pass program works today, and in Brockton, in most cases, it's the municipal government, but in Brockton, it's actually BAT that administers this. So there are partners in Brockton, I believe. The Youth Pass program is a program where riders 18 to 25 with low income can apply. As I mentioned earlier, they generally demonstrate their eligibility through enrollment in Mass Health, SNAP, or Mass Grant, although there's a couple other programs they can be enrolled in. There's an online application like the one we've described here, but in that case, there's no back-end automatic verification. They upload basically an image of their letter approving them for Mass Health or enrolling them in Mass Health or Mass Grant or whatever, and an ID and a couple other things. That application is then routed to one of our municipal partners. So if the person lives in Brockton, it would be routed to BAT. BAT reviews that application and approves or denies it. And then the rider is mailed a Youth Pass card, which is a special Charlie card that confers this discount. That program has a couple limitations that we're excited to basically fix with this program. The first is that it has a program year. So I think it's October 1st that the program year starts, and you're just enrolled for the rest of the year. So if you applied in January, it would end at the end of September. Or if you applied in August, you'd only get 2 months and have to reapply. So that's not great. And then the second is our municipal partners are excited to help their constituents, but they're currently doing this largely out of the goodness of their hearts, and we appreciate that. But we know that if we're going to do a much bigger, larger scale program like this one, we want to make sure we have a paid partner to make sure that we're not burdening, our municipal partners in that way. And so that's why we expect to sort of shift the model a little bit, building on the learnings from the Youth Pass program.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Aaron?
Yeah, oops. I wasn't sure if I got my mute off there. Sorry about that. So real quick question. I think I know the answer on this, but with this slide up right now, wondering if you looked at the 250% FPL threshold that LA decided to use, given I think as we all know, our Boston Metro cost of living is up there, and comparatively speaking to the federal poverty level. And if you looked at that sort of, although we've got these other agencies all around 200%, what your findings might have been.
Yeah, so we looked at ranges between we looked at 100%, 200%, and 300%. We certainly could look at 250. There's sort of two elements to it. One is the cost, and David, maybe if you have that handy someplace, you could pull it up. You could pull it up and share the difference in cost at those three FPL levels, just because of the number of enrollees. So David can share what we got at 300. We didn't do 250. And the other piece of it was, again, this administrative complexity of lots of programs are at 200% of the federal poverty level, and getting that incremental 50% basically enrollment is more difficult. These are the types of things that I think the T post-launch will be contending with. However, one thing that was really interesting in our peer agency research, we spoke to the folks in New York, and in New York, the threshold is 100% of FPL. And what they told us was their enrollment is really low, and they think it's because that threshold is for folks who are so transient and basically hard to pin down and get sort of applying the program because they're struggling so much with sort of a lack of means that it's sort of hard to administer a program, which is not, which is in and of itself a challenge, but they actually are looking to expand it to 200% for that reason. So anyway, a long answer to your question. Maybe David, do you have those numbers?
Sure, I have kind of some unformatted numbers in front of me, but for 200%, we're seeing in year one cost between about 25 and 26 million, according to this table. If we were to move that up to 300%, it would be 31 to 34 million, so about a 50% increase. And then in the out years, rather than about 50 to 60 million, we'd be looking at more like 82 to 97 million in the out years at a 300% FPL cutoff. So roughly costs go up by about 50% if you increase the FPL by 50%. That's not necessarily a one-to-one link just by the math, but that's how it works out in our scenario.
Sure. That makes sense, and didn't think about the operational sort of effect of moving up to 300% or 250%. Well, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out if this does go into effect. I guess that the question I had on this was about the community partner, and it sounds like the RFP's out. I'm just wondering what were sort of, if there were any sort of baseline expectations built into the RFP around, whether there's bricks and mortar locations that the partner would provide access for signing up. What are the services that are expected of that partner to reach the community and individuals who might be eligible for this?
Yeah, so the RFP, we are looking for coverage around the service area. We appreciate that some partners will have lots of locations and some will have 1 or 2 or 3. And so we're open to a variety of, types of applicants, basically. I think the other thing that I would note about the RFP is that we intend to effectively leave it open. I'm not a procurement expert, but there's a mechanism where we can sort of have an initial RFP and then have it be rolling, such that if we get a partner or 2 that cover most of the network, but we find that in Brockton or in Lynn or wherever we're missing sort of an in-person location and we'd really like that, if then we get an application from a one-off in one of those locations, we can work with them to sort of fill gaps. So I think that in a perfect world, we have one partner that covers the whole MBTA service area. I don't think that partner exists, and so we'll sort of see what we can get in terms of coverage and then look to fill it in from there. And then I think the second question was about how they'll do outreach. I mean, when we've been doing our public meetings, getting folks to come to a public meeting is hard. Getting folks enrolled in a program by doing stuff like setting up a table at local fairs or going to a public housing complex and sitting in the courtyard with a table, or putting up flyers at local locations that are neighborhoods with high low-income populations or whatever. That's the kind of work we would like to lean on our partner for. It's the kind of work we'll be doing as well, but it's just one of those things that we'd like to multiply our efforts. So that's what we have in mind.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So it sounds like the profile you're looking for is like a community-based organization or a CDC or maybe even a housing authority who gets into community development. How are you getting that RFP out? So, and if I just make sure I understood you correctly, it sounds like you're open to multiple partners, or you're looking for potentially multiple partners across the region. How are you promoting the RFP to the potential partners?
So the RFP is on Combis with all of our RFPs, but our team who administers programs like this, who will be managing this program, David and I do fair policy and get things bring ideas from analysis through board approval. Basically, the team that is going to administer the program and will be managing that partner relationship, they actually put together a list of potential partners, and our procurement office reached out to all of those partners when it launched. Certainly may not have been exhaustive. So we did reach out to folks who might have been interested in it. We had a pre-bid conference a couple of weeks ago, and we're talking about it in rooms like this. But if you have folks in your community that you think might be interested in it, it is on Combis, and I can share the link if that would be helpful.
Yeah, if you could, there's several that I can think of that might be interested.
That'd be
Thanks.
great. Yeah.
So guys, sorry, we have 11 minutes left. Steve and Duncan, can we let David finish up and then do Q&A at the end? We also have 2 more fair programs.
Yeah. Didn't realize there was more. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'll let David take the mic back, but just so everyone knows, at the very beginning, I mentioned that we have these 2 other smaller changes. Low income versus the exciting part, it's the complicated part, it's the expensive part. So I'm really glad that we got all the questions on that. But just for completeness, why doesn't David take us through these last couple of slides, and then I'll finalize. I'll do a quick review of the process, and then any other questions.
Thanks, Stephen. Yeah, as Stephen had mentioned, the loan compares is the kind of centerpiece of our package, but there are 2 other smaller changes. The first of which is to replace change tickets with Charlie cards. So when one boards a MBTA bus or Green Line or Mattapan Line light rail trolley vehicle, they pay with cash at the fare box at the front of the vehicle. If somebody overpays by more than 50 cents with cash, they get their change issued on a paper Charlie ticket. So if you board a bus, you pay a $5 bill for a $1.70 fare, you get your $3.30 in change on a paper ticket. That paper ticket technology is no longer supported, and we have to basically stop supporting it because we just can't get the equipment anymore. What we are proposing to do as mitigation for this and to make it a seamless transition for all of our riders is to stock Charlie cards. These are the actual plastic tappable Charlie cards on the front of every bus vehicle in our fleet. We've actually started installing these dispensers on buses already, and in the coming months, they will be fully rolled out across the system. So instead of a rider boarding and putting a $5 bill in the fare box and getting a change ticket, they will board the vehicle, take a plastic Charlie card from the free dispenser, tap that at the fare box to put their $5 onto the card, and then ride. This is just a technology requirement that we can't support those magnetic striped paper tickets anymore. So that's why we are transitioning over to the plastic Charlie cards instead. On March 1st, we will stop issuing the change tickets on a pilot basis. And then upon approval by the board, this will become a permanent policy that we will stop issuing paper change tickets on board vehicles for people who overpay in cash. We will also stop accepting bills greater than $5 in the case that somebody does try to pay with cash on board a vehicle without using a plastic card, so that we don't have a situation where somebody loses more than $3.30 in lost change as a result of the way they interact with the fare box. Next slide, please. Our final change is to make our commuter rail holiday pass permanent. A few years ago, we launched a commuter rail weekend pass, which grants unlimited travel on the Saturday and Sunday of any weekends for $10. In the middle of last year, on a pilot basis, we expanded this to include federal holidays. So for a 3-day federal holiday weekends, like President's Day a couple weeks from now, instead of covering just the Saturday and the Sunday on that specific weekends, that $10 unlimited ride pass covers the Saturday, the Sunday, and the Monday. On a midweek federal holiday, like 4th of July is this year, the $10 pass would cover the day of that federal holiday. And for Thanksgiving weekends, uniquely, it will cover Thursday through Sunday of Thanksgiving weekends. We launched this holiday expansion of the weekend pass on a pilot basis last year, and we've seen about a $50,000 increase in net revenue and induced ridership. So it's kind of been a win-win both for ridership and revenue. And this is 8 to 10 days a year. We expect to, we hope to keep this going just because we see it's something that riders demand. And from a financial point of view, it's 0 to a small positive increase on our bottom line. Next slide.
Awesome. Oh, we have one more slide that I forgot to preview. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, to speak a little bit about our next steps. The MBTA, anytime we make a fare change, we're federally required to do an equity analysis to check for any disparate impacts that a fare change may have on riders of color or a disproportionate burden it may impose on riders of low income. In the situation of a fare increase, we have to show that fares do not increase for riders of color more than they increase for riders as a whole. And they do not increase for riders of low income more than they increase for riders as a whole. In this scenario where we are actually lowering fares, we have to do basically the same analysis in the other direction. Make sure that fares do not decrease for riders of color less than they decrease for riders as a whole. And they do not decrease for riders of low income less than they decrease for riders as a whole. The two main takeaways from this analysis are the disparate impact ratio, which concerns riders of color, and the disproportionate burden ratio, which concerns low-income riders. We have published a draft equity analysis, which I will actually drop in the chat right now, so you can go on and see the full analysis if you would like. But the two main takeaways are the disparate impact ratio we've calculated is about 1.4x. This means that fares are decreasing for riders of color 1.4 times as much as they are decreasing for riders as a whole. For disproportionate burden, we have 1.6x. Fares are decreasing for low-income riders more than they are decreasing for riders as a whole. So on both counts, the analysis passes and shows that this change has pro-equity impacts on the net. Stephen?
Thanks. Yeah, I'll just wrap by giving a quick reminder of where we are in the calendar here, which is to say, we spent January introducing this and February taking public comment and finalizing that equity analysis. We'll spend the first couple of weeks of March reflecting on that public comment and making any tweaks based on what we've heard, finalizing that equity analysis, et cetera, and then return to the board in March for a vote. This is our public meeting schedule. We're halfway through. We've had 4. We have 4 to go. I'd highlight, just based on when I'm looking around the room where everyone is, our virtual one on February 27th, but of course, we'd be happy to see you or any of your peers in any of these other locations. I know we only have 5 minutes or 4 minutes, but I'll put David and my emails in the chat as well, but we'll welcome any other questions in the time we have.
And I'd also welcome any direction you want to give me on where the first draft should go. So no pressure.
Well, and actually, I do want to mention, having looked at these processes for other systems, that it's pretty clear to me that the MBTA has done its homework on this and is landing in a place that, certainly at first glance makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yes, I would agree with that statement.
So the what I've seen from just watching this now for a couple of weeks is that, and I think the Boston pilot, and Matt had to leave, the Boston pilot results that just came out on its 3 free bus routes, I think plays this out. Even if buses were eventually made free system-wide, you still would want a program like this because the T system is so transfer-based and transfer-driven that this would really help. So, my sense is that broadly we support this. I have huge concerns about the affordability of this program, especially in year 2, and especially if the governor's budget doesn't pass. And then, that is our job to be aware of those things.
Yeah.
But that's that's beyond Stephen's pay grade, and I get that. So
I also recall back, looking at the change in the poverty level question again. My understanding is one of the reasons New York went with 100 is they couldn't afford 200. When you get to a certain system size where you're, 150 passenger miles a year for the T, say, and New York is 300 or 400, affordability becomes more and more of an issue. The more heavily traveled your system is. And I think they also looked at that when they originally picked the 100, and they're probably still doing math on 200 or 250, about which comes down to the dollars ultimately.
I just want to address Steve's question in the chat. The programs that we have on the list are the programs that are offered by DTA and Mass Health that have cutoffs at or below 200%. And so the way we would think about, at least at first blush, expanding would be to look at programs that are higher cutoffs. I've worked closely with our partners at HHS, who have been really awesome partners on this program. really enthusiastic to help, which has been really great. Their programs are really complicated. So, so figuring out what's what is, you know, that will be the next step.
The administration, there's something that's already in place. Those are, while maybe incalculable, very important. And I'm really delighted to hear that you looked at them the way you did. So.
Brian, I just have a concern. The statement was made that some of the vendors that they are looking at have large networks of outreach, others do not. I would just want to make sure that that outreach is pretty significant in communities that may benefit more so than other communities. Not that all communities won't benefit, but some of them, like Chelsea, definitely has a need for this type of discount.
Got it. All right, so just quickly, next steps. If you all agree, I'll take a crack at drafting a first draft oversight report on this. I'll share it with everybody. We can't discuss it on email because of OML reasons, but we will meet next week. And we can discuss it then. I'll try to get the minutes out ASAP. I've actually been taking them live, and I'll get that first draft out as soon as we can. And if that works for everybody, feel free to call me if you want to have any specific questions or discuss anything in particular.
Thank you so much, Brian.
Thank you, ma'am. And
Thanks,
if you don't mind taking a motion to adjourn, I'll make a note of that too.
I'll make a
So
motion.
moved.
Okay,
Second.
All right, we're good.
great.
Thank
Have a
you.
great weekend, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, David.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
all.
Thanks.